like a personal success that we are reaching here. Everybody coming from esteemed agencies, and everybody here is young. And this is very important for Moldova's digitalization pursuit. I want to present a friend and a mentor. You have become a mentor for the last 2 months as well. Thank you so much. Jeremy Purser from Cardano Foundation. He is the enterprise adoption lead, and this is probably the best thing that can happen to us to get introduced into blockchain. You know, in these 4 hours, it's not going to be very technical, or it's probably not going to be technical at all. It's mostly to understand how do we use blockchain, the use cases, and then we can start thinking how do we integrate it in the right spots where we actually need it, and where the rest of the world is using it. I'm Tudor from Blazor Labs. We're trying to facilitate digitalization in Moldova. We have experience with blockchain, and we really wanted to share. And here's Jeremy, who is going to share this experience, share for you the basics of blockchain.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for coming. It's a great honor that you have chosen to spend half of your Friday with me and to discuss blockchain, discuss digital transformation. So I hope this can be a very fun session, and I do have a lot of information prepared. I may not cover everything, but I'm very happy to share this presentation with you once I'm done. And yeah, if you have any questions, don't feel shy to ask. So this is my first time here in Moldova, and it's so far it's a very beautiful place to visit, Chisinau, and I'm happy to learn more about what the strategic goals are for Moldova as a country, and then understand how to implement new technologies such as blockchain. That's why it's very critical to have partners and friends like Tudor with Blazor Labs, who is here locally and developing solutions. And hopefully everyone here, we're able to come to some cooperation in the future. Okay, so I think we'll just jump into the introduction. This first session will cover a lot of the basics of blockchain and business considerations. I do want to say that this is part of what's called Cardano Academy. So at Cardano Foundation, we offer a lot of free training course materials. And these are also certified courses that is up to 8 hours long for studying at your own pace to learn more about blockchain and all the technical components. And yeah, just go through that. We also have a newly launched Cardano Blockchain Certified Associate course. And this is more looking at business fundamentals, which is a 2-hour course. So today is more of a general overview for all of these materials. We have done some work with very large companies such as Petrobras in Brazil. And for Petrobras, we provide training to all 40,000 of their employees. And for us working with them, we view education as the first step to building out a long-term relationship. Okay, so who is Cardano Foundation, right? So we are a non-for-profit organization based in Switzerland, and we generally just support the adoption of blockchain in regulated markets and with enterprises. So some highlights on Cardano. Cardano as a blockchain is based off of peer-reviewed research papers. So over 140 different research papers has gone into the thinking about how do you create high-quality infrastructure, how do you ensure it is sustainable, and how do you ensure that it is in line with regulatory and industry requirements. So just some quick stats. The Cardano was established in 2015, and we launched in 2017. Since the day that we have launched, the Cardano blockchain has never gone down. So, not many companies or tech platforms can say this. Usually there's sometimes a shutdown, even when using things such as AWS or Microsoft Azure, but Cardano has always been running. And we use that as a statement to the quality of relying on this technology for your critical applications. We have a presence in over 65 countries. Actually, it's more than 80 countries today. And there's a very active global ecosystem of close to 5 million people who are contributing to the growth of the Cardano ecosystem. Okay, so why are we here? Well, first thing is if you take out your phone, you can scan this QR code and you can join what's called Slido. So Slido is a platform for interaction. And so here, this is where I will ask you a few questions, and you can also ask me questions either anonymously or with your name. So feel free to use this at any time.
It's not open yet.
It is open, but there's no questions yet. Okay? So we can just ask an initial question is, how are you? Great. So now you can see a little bit on how this tool works. Okay. I am fine with Corneluska. Okay. Well, maybe you can tell me what Corneluska is, and I will also.
That's my name.
Okay, great.
Very good.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move more forward. So blockchain. This is kind of why we're here, and I'd like to ask you first, what is your interest level in blockchain? So if you can rate this from 1 to 6. 6, you are very, very interested, and you hope the blockchain is going to be used in Moldova everywhere. 1, you really do not care, you don't know anything, and you're happy to learn something. Okay, good. So far, so good. Most people very interested and positively interested. Nice. And we have 18 people taking the poll. Okay. Now, what is your experience level? So, here a 1 would be you have no experience, and a 6 would be that you currently are using blockchain in your operation. So this will help me understand the pace of delivering some information. And who wrote 6? Okay. That's great.
Out of statistics.
Okay. So most people have a basic understanding of blockchain, and that's great. So I hope we can move this from a 2 to at least a 4 by the end of today's masterclass. Now, one thing I've learned, and as you can also see behind me here, Moldova has a very ambitious strategy by 2030 to become a full digital state. And so this is not just about blockchain. This is about digital transformation and understanding which technologies can be applied to solve these critical industry problems, to support economic development, to support the growth of society, and more so to be legally compliant. So not just something that we do for fun, but something that within our organizations, blockchain can be a core technology. You can also see that this is, much more broader than just blockchain. And so we also need to think about, well, how do we integrate with blockchain? Which part of a blockchain do we need to use? Depending on your use case, you may not need to put everything on a blockchain, and we will cover that. And so I like to, first highlight some quotes. So this here is from the Deputy Prime Minister. Moldova is more than world-class wine. We are a sandbox for deep tech and bold innovation, from nanotech to agrotech, from AI to clean energy. And it's wonderful to see diverse use cases across industries being developed here. A key to success is trying to understand how much of what is being delivered can benefit from shared infrastructure. So we don't recreate the wheel every time. And from Nicoletta, which I'm sure everyone also knows, we firmly believe access to electronic identity is not a luxury, it is a right. And here, when we think about electronic identity, we should also be considering how to use this identity across different applications. And not just for individuals, but now we also think about for products, we think about for IoT devices. We also can now start thinking about AI agents and the role of having verified digital identity at an organizational level. So Frederick Gagard, our CEO, his statement for Cardano is that starting with security and correctness from research to engineering to real-world applications, with each steady, confident step, Cardano is becoming the platform of choice for institutions and businesses that look for high assurance and reliability for their business applications. So high assurance is another key term. Okay, so let's move into digitalization problems. So today, in the world of supply chain, it's very complex. You have multiple different networks, you have data silos, so you have information stored in each different segment of a supply chain or value chain. There's a very large lack in transparency. You have sensitive data, but there's a demand for getting access. And so how do you manage this with providing access but not revealing, a business secret or some information that may be a competitive advantage? So this overall demand for authentication is driving forward the digital transformation activities. So when we think about this, we can easily set up a solution that one application can have. But when we think about interoperability, we look at standardized metrics need to be considered. You also need to consider your supplier engagement, understanding if there's a guideline that's created, is this being implemented by our producers, our manufacturers of goods. Data collection and analysis is difficult. So it's not easy to do, but it becomes a critical activity to figure out, how do we design our systems properly. So some general problems that exist. So here is about for Nike. Right now with counterfeit goods, this is a $2 trillion problem worldwide. And there's a major lawsuit that Nike has with an online shoe reseller called StockX. StockX was actually, they were caught to be selling fake Nikes on their platform. And this has a huge reputation risk, not only to the brands of the goods, but for the companies that's involved, even if they don't know that they're selling counterfeit goods. Netflix. So when we think about digital transformation with Netflix, they originally suffered from what's called for password sharing. So users were sharing their passwords for their Netflix accounts, and actually that was costing Netflix globally $6 billion US. And so how did they tackle this problem? And they had a huge crackdown on the level of devices that are able to use a password at any given time. And this actually impacted more than 9 million customers for password sharing. So what can blockchain do for looking at supply chain authentication or supply chain traceability? So there's 4 major areas that we think can have improvements. Optimized traceability for real-time tracking of data, having advanced security for different data records, ensuring that this information cannot be tampered with by a bad actor. For elevated transparency, you can have a shared database level of infrastructure that everyone can have access to for third-party services. And operational efficiency. So a lot when we think about for digital transformation is the investment into the infrastructure. And if we're using public blockchain technology, most of what is public blockchain is free to use. And so we have millions and millions of dollars that are invested into blockchains that makes it very cost efficient to deploy. for some use case. So here we have on Cardano, there is a use case for 3D printing. And there's a company known as Iagon who does decentralized data storage. And they are working with Worth Group. And Worth Group is one of the largest platforms for 3D printing and having IP being uploaded for like certain design files. So let's say if you want to print a helmet or any sort of small component. The issue is managing licenses for this IP. So how do we track who is actually using our licenses, and how can we confirm payment for the use of this? So here we're attaching licenses to traceable blockchain tokens to track the redemption or track when this IP is being used, and also to counter any counterfeit or IP piracy issues that a competitor may implement. Maybe you've heard of NASA. So NASA is collaborating with Cardano Foundation, and here this is for the Goddard Space Flight Center. And with NASA, you may not be able to see this, but what they are doing is they are leveraging blockchain for advanced traceability on all of their components that they use that goes into their spaceships and equipment that's launched into outer space. And here there's what they need is a very clear audit trail of where their supplies is being sourced and where it is going. And so this here is looking at bringing out transparency across different departments for inventory management. These are also different organizations that need access to this data. And a major goal that they have is having robust data security. And so are you getting access to the correct information? And so how do you combine data records with verifiable digital identity? So how do we confirm that on a blockchain, this information is uploaded by NASA? So when we think about Industry 3.0, or we think about how blockchains can really play a role with enterprise and government use cases, what we think about are these 4 different verticals. And so, what level of transparency and validation is required? And normally when we think about transparency, we consider fraud detection. So how easy is it to determine whether or not this piece of data is real or fake? When you have multi-party trust issues, you have a very heavy focus on data security. And for traceability, this is thinking about access to these shared data records and more. A big theme about blockchain is called trade tech. So in general, what trade tech is it's looking at, okay, well now we're not just focused purely on the components of our supply chain, but we're looking at ESG related issues. And so, like, are we having fair labor? Are we following other sustainability and development goals? And this is a much more larger set of data points that we need to think about, well, how do we digitize and how do we connect this information to our digital identity solutions or to our publicly available data records? Okay, so are we having fun so far with this information? We got a yes from the fun group over there. All right. Good, we got an answer. Let me just continue through here and start going a bit deeper now into some of these components related to blockchain. So with blockchain, a big focus on how blockchain works is with cryptography. And cryptography, although it is in blockchain, we also have cryptography in many common areas in our digital life. It's in how we use the internet, it's with end-to-end encryption, multi-factor authentication, 2FA, single sign-on through your Google account to log in. All of this is based on cryptography, which has been around very heavily since the 1980s and even earlier. And then blockchain uses cryptography and it enables many different applications. Cryptocurrencies is a major use case for blockchain. It's not the only use case. If we start thinking about supply chain management, we can think about voting systems, digital rights management or digital identity. It all benefits from the use of cryptography. So we can start with cryptocurrencies and just look at Bitcoin. So I have a small video here I can play, which is from Cardano Academy.
Was that it solved what's known as the double spending problem, where a bad actor might spend a cryptocurrency twice before the recipient is aware that only one of the transactions was valid. The Bitcoin white paper proposes a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of the chronological order of transactions. It is decentralized, peer-to-peer, censorship-resistant, and not backed by any government or institution. Each Bitcoin transaction resides on a public ledger accessible by anyone with an internet connection. On the 3rd of January 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto mined the first Bitcoin block, which had a reward of 50 Bitcoins. The first recipient of Bitcoin was Hal Finney, who received 10 Bitcoins from Satoshi Nakamoto in the first Bitcoin transaction on December 12, 2009. Some notable transactions include the purchase of 2 pizzas on May 22, 2010 for 10,000 Bitcoin, $40 equivalent at the time. May 22nd is celebrated each year as Bitcoin Pizza Day. On April 10, 2020, one Bitcoin wallet belonging to the Bitfinex crypto exchange moved 161,500 BTC worth $1.1 billion at the time for a fee of approximately $0.68.
All right, nice little video. So I think everyone has heard of Bitcoin before, right? Today, Bitcoin is one of the world's largest assets that exist. And as a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin has been around now for almost 16 years. And if we think about Bitcoin and comparing this to fiat currency or to gold, there are many advantages of using Bitcoin. You can have 24/7 access. It's available globally for any transfers. You have clear transaction history. So from the creation of a Bitcoin to who's received it, we can track all of this transaction data. You maintain clear control over your funds or your assets. And so I'm originally from the United States, and when I went to the central bank in the state of New York, I went down into the basement and I see how it is that they were managing gold reserves for each country. And basically, in the basement, you have a big floor and you have tape on the ground that marks this is for UK, this is for India, this is for another country. And they're wheeling the gold around the basement. Okay, but now if there's some sort of conflict or if there's a war, the United States can easily say, hey, you no longer have access to your gold. But if we think about Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a digital version of gold. And it's not locked away in anyone's basement for management. It's something that, as an organization, you're able to maintain secure control at any time. It's also integrated with forensic analysis. And today there are very sophisticated tools that is doing tracing of information such as what is the use of a cryptocurrency, who is the owner, and it's moving much further now out of a peer-to-peer payment network into kind of global reserves and trust. So if we can trust a blockchain for Bitcoin, certainly we can think about trusting blockchains for all sorts of industry applications. There are some challenges that remain, of course, with cryptocurrencies. But as time goes on, we continue to see more and more acceptance in different markets around the world. So not just the retail space and not just the investor space, but with different governments as well, and different use cases for payments. Currently, there's around 15,000 businesses worldwide that are using Bitcoin as a payment. And because of that, we have a lot more use cases that exist, and I'll cover that very soon, related to stablecoins. Bitcoin has been said to have died 415 times now since the history of its creation. And you always will hear in the news that now is the last time Bitcoin will ever exist. But that's really not the reality behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. It does not mean that there are not risks. There are always cryptocurrencies that could be a fraud, but there are also startups that do not have anything behind them as well. And that's part of a risk of using new technology that's open and publicly available. So there is some due diligence required. Okay, so then where does blockchain excel? Well, for Bitcoin, we were looking at where trust is lacking. Is this a real unique digital asset? Is my Bitcoin different from your Bitcoin? So transparency is very critical for this. And security is essential in maintaining the fact that you have ownership of these assets. Over time, we can see that total cryptocurrency transactions are rapidly growing. So this is a chart over the past 10 years for transaction volumes. And stablecoin supply, which is kind of becoming the bulk of the transactions. So outside of the 15,000 companies using Bitcoin, we have a very large growth in the tokenization of dollars as a stablecoin or euro as a stablecoin or other fiat currencies. So payments today, we're looking more than 250 billion US dollars in stablecoin payments. And that's a huge increase from, under 50 billion 5 years ago. So it's becoming much more acceptable on a global scale, the role of payments with different types of cryptocurrencies. Overall, the global space for blockchain users has also grown 6 times in the past 3 years. And so we're approaching, close to the 1 billion mark for cryptocurrency users globally. And that's becoming a very large percentage of the world. I think now in the United States, we're getting close to 30% of all citizens have, they own cryptocurrencies or are using them for payments. Okay, but you still have certain challenges with using blockchain. There's a lot of challenges related to product market fit. You need to think about Web 2 interoperability. You have the infrastructure quality issues, and also data interpretation is another big challenge. But because of this growth in total users, because of the value that's been generated within Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and stablecoins, many people see the economic relevance across almost every industry for where blockchain can be relevant. And we'll start talking a bit deeper on these subjects. Really, in today's world, there is not, a single industry that will not benefit from using blockchain technology. And the economic relevance is that from Gartner research, they expect that the value add for blockchain-based services is going to grow to $3.1 trillion by 2030. And mainly what that means is that right now we're kind of at this point of good quality in the underlying blockchain technology and related infrastructure to really enable all these interesting use cases. Now, a problem, if you start trying to get into blockchain research and education, there's a ton of terms that comes out. There are, just like every technology stack, you have multiple jargon that exist. And that adds a lot of complexity in trying to understand what is blockchain trying to achieve. We also have several different components of blockchain. So, we have also types of cryptography that exist. Some of it is very specialized with blockchain. And each of these is at a different level of maturity. So we need to understand this when we're going to implement a new solution. And I will share this presentation with you. So you don't need to take, you can take photos, of course. Just make sure you get my good side when making the picture. So here we can take a look and say, okay, so we have all of these different components that exist for a blockchain, and we have all these new features that are coming out. Well, how does that compare to a hype cycle curve? On the core infrastructure, so where Cardano sits as infrastructure as a layer 1 blockchain, and we think about the management of assets such as blockchain wallets, this is actually now reaching a point of maturity for mass market use. And there's a number of other components that are starting to get into this product market fit analysis. If we compare this to AI, we can see that AI has many emerging ideas that's much more further on the left side of kind of being a trigger for innovation. So if I compare these two, and I'll go back, to blockchain. In 2016, I remember many new ideas that came out for how a blockchain can be used in real industry. At that time, there wasn't many ways to use a blockchain outside of a cryptocurrency. And that became kind of a huge bottleneck in delivering the value for real world applications. But today's landscape is very different. Okay, so just to check your understanding, I have a better understanding of the blockchain landscape. So from what I've presented so far, has this confused you or has it helped you improve your understanding? Okay, so far I see 7 people. Okay, now close to half the room.
How about I feel a better understanding how many things I don't know about blockchain?
Okay, so you want to know more things now. Good.
At least now we start knowing what there is to know.
Yeah. You're more curious than when you got here. There are many, many things to ask about blockchain. That is very true. And I hope to cover more in better detail. Still, though, some of you are struggling, okay, great. So let's go into some the building blocks about blockchain basics. So blockchain you can think about it as it is a chain of these data blocks, and these data blocks are full of transactions. So you have transaction 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are immutably stacked. So once these transactions occur and it's on a blockchain, that data is basically never going to change. It's very, very difficult to change information once it gets stored on a blockchain. So when we think of transaction history, we can think about it like freezing something in time. For centuries to come, we will always see this history that exists on a blockchain. You can also say that this is a globally verified record of historic data of these transactions, which is payments, which are assets, which are data records. And all of this information is tamper-proof. So once it's there, you cannot change that information once it's put onto a blockchain. So we have a sentence that says a blockchain is a decentralized digital ledger, which uses cryptography to securely maintain, update, and verify the transaction history of all participants in a network. And yeah, let me kind of go through here. So when we think about the past, the way many of us manage data records is on paper. Or, there would be a central office somewhere that's like storing information. With a blockchain, the history of the blockchain itself, that becomes now our data ledger. That's what it means to be a ledger, or where is the record keeping stored? With a blockchain, with decentralization, everyone has a copy of the data ledger. So everyone has a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, everyone has a copy of the Cardano blockchain, and we all have the same record of the transaction history. So we can have a lot more trust that this information is the same that's held by each party. And that way we also know that it is tamper-proof information. So security is at everything with blockchain. And security in this context is looking at advanced uses of cryptography to kind of manage the creation of a block, the creation of a transaction. Everything uses what's called a data hash and also digital signatures. And that covers particular information about a blockchain. So you will have information about the previous block information that will be hashed. And you'll have a hash of like the current block. And this like chain of hashes is a representation of the data that's inside each block. And so we can see very easily if anyone tries to change one of these data hashes. So this is kind of the foundation of the trust that exists with blockchain technology. Now, it goes even deeper. And so when we think about this, what we can easily determine is that each transaction is unique and secure. We can easily determine that each Bitcoin is unique because of the fact that we're using cryptography. And for a blockchain, we can manage the protocol version. We manage what's called block producer ID. Every transaction is time-stamped for when it occurred. And we have all this transaction information. And so this becomes a very complete system of bringing trust into using blockchain as core technology. And a lot of that is already done for you, so you don't need to recreate this new trust wheel. Now, when we think about blockchains, we think then about, okay, so we know that things need to be secure, and we know that things need to be scalable, but why do things need to be decentralized? Like, why is this important to begin with? So I often, when I get this question, I will think about Facebook. And I would say, okay, so with Facebook, if I say I'm going to send you, a Bitcoin on Facebook, and Facebook is managing this whole set of transactions, will you trust that you can spend this Bitcoin if it's only controlled by Facebook? Some people may say yes, because they may really love Facebook. And that may work internally, just for users of Facebook. But now we face severe limitations to say, well, how do I now take that Bitcoin outside of Facebook and take it over to X, or take it to LinkedIn, or take it to some other platform? How can we do that? That's one area that decentralization enables. And so we call this like public permissionless blockchain technology. On the other side, we have what's called private and permissioned. And so, that's looking at the management of how do I gain access to this network? With blockchains such as Bitcoin and Cardano, it's public. Anyone can access, anyone can use, and there's no restrictions here. So we look at private, federated, and public. Private will have limited access. It's much more centralized control of how a blockchain gets deployed. And you have organizations such as Hyperledger that exist who have a private blockchain that's made. Federated, you have companies such as R3 Corda, and they will have more professional control of a certain group of institutions that says this is going to be our blockchain. And then, of course, we have public, which has decentralized control, and it's not really owned by anyone. So there's no real country that's like managing Bitcoin. They participate, but they don't control it. So when we're using blockchain, we have some major considerations to have. So immutability, this is a strength, but this is also a weakness. So we need to consider what information is actually going to be put on a blockchain. And for security, we need to think about what's called private key management, which is the actual way you control access to a Bitcoin, being able to sign a transaction that says, I want to move my asset from account A to account B. If you lose your private keys, you lose access to what you've added to a blockchain. So there is some IT management that's really required. We have other issues as well, such as regulatory landscape, general skill set of people. But these are issues that are kind of maturing over time. Okay, so if we think about it in the sporting events world, a private blockchain would be like a Goldman Sachs league or a company sport team. The company chooses, these are the people, these are the roles. Federated would be like looking at the World Cup, and public could be looking at a skate park or anyone having access to this environment. Also, like a highway is also considered public. Anyone can drive on the highway and help build out the infrastructure. So a question. I think this type of blockchain has the most relevance: private, federated, or public. So if you can, on using Slido, just mark which one do you think is the most relevant. And you'll find it under polls in case. All right, so most people are saying public, which is great. And do we have any answers here? Let's just see. So, it's actually a trick question in some ways, because there is a place for private blockchains and there is a place for public blockchains, but they both have different types of challenges. So if I'm thinking about a private blockchain, mostly this is considered to be like an enterprise blockchain. So like IBM creates a blockchain, and they launch this for an industry. A lot of that infrastructure is very centralized, meaning it's very costly to maintain. Because when you have a private blockchain, all of these components that is set up in order to manage the transaction history, the creation of new blocks or the creation of a new transaction, that infrastructure is only available to this group. And it's kind of hard to manage successfully over time. It's also hard to open up a private blockchain to new entrants. Public blockchains, you have issues such as governance and decision making. So what's the next feature that we're adding to a public blockchain? This is a process that we don't have like Cardano Inc., and we don't have a master product roadmap like we would for a private blockchain. So there's this process of coming to understanding how do we create these updates for new features or new functionality. It's also more open, so there's no restriction on what gets added. So really it comes down to creativity and thinking about these new applications. And also regulation. Many times as an organization, we want to be in control of all parts of our technology. And now that we're saying that there's decentralized blockchain infrastructure, we don't necessarily own that infrastructure. So we need to think, okay, well, how do we make it compliant for the use of that technology? So, some key takeaways here is that blockchain is a complex technology stack, but you can start thinking about this in different layers. And some core themes is about traceability. It's looking at data security. It's looking at data transparency and the role of decentralization. Okay, so I think we're on time, but all right, I need to see. Does anyone have any general questions? Yes.
These blocks of information, do they have equal quantity of data, or it could be different size of data seen in the block?
Okay. So the question is about, do the blocks in a blockchain, do they have the same size data or different data sizes that exist? Each block has a limit to its technical size. So there is kind of a max quantity of data that can fit per block. And to mitigate this, we also have different integrations with different data storage layers. So and sometimes, like when we think about for enterprise use cases, we might have our industry data stored off a blockchain, but we will take some link to that data storage layer and put that link on a blockchain itself, or the proofs of this information on a blockchain. So I'll explain that in the second half of the presentation, but to answer the question basically, every block is the same size. Any other questions? Was that a fixing your glasses? Okay.
who is sealing these blocks of information? So you make transactions, you accumulate some information. Who decides that it's time to seal it in one block?
It's a good question. So we have, there are ordering processes. So if many people are submitting different transactions, normally there is a process of like first in, first out, where we try to say, okay, this is in a specific time frame. All of these transactions will go into block number 1. And even if the block is not full, if that time frame is reached, then we will say, okay, this is the cutoff point, and now that information is being produced in a block. And globally, you'll have a number of transaction validators, which basically their role is submitting this block to the network. So there's a selection process where we see, okay, who is going to submit this block? And there are many different mechanisms to enable this. It's called a consensus mechanism. But that goes into like the governance of the process of selecting who adds a block. So when it's a private network, you have direct control over who is adding information to a blockchain. In a public network, it can be anyone who has joined the network and to say that I am willing to add a block to the network. When you do that, there is some economic incentives with the public blockchain. And so normally you get paid some sort of fee for doing this role. So like for Bitcoin, we have what's called Bitcoin mining. And for miners, they set up very large rooms full of GPUs, and they're trying to win the selection process to be the block producer. And when they are selected to create that block, that is when they receive a reward in Bitcoin.
So mining is creating this block, which is then filled with information produced
Yes.
up to the time the block is created.
Yes. Mining is one way. There are other ways. For example, we have proof of stake. And proof of stake is how the Cardano blockchain is defined. And essentially this looks at, how are people selected? So in proof of work in Bitcoin, it's a race to solve a mathematical equation. So it used to be very simple to say, okay, like what is 6 times 10? And whoever answers 6 times 10 first, you get selected. Now it is a very, very, very long equation. And so Bitcoin miners, they have this equipment that's doing random number generation. And they're just picking numbers very, very quick to see who gets selected first. And proof of stake, we switch the selection process to be more not based off of your hardware equipment, but it's to be tied to the ownership of the cryptocurrency. So for ADA, it's more of like a lottery system. And your role as a block producer is to have cryptocurrency, what's known as delegated to you. And so that means you have a lot of lottery tickets where everyone who owns the cryptocurrency, they say, okay, I support you as the miner, as the transaction validator. And the more ADA that we kind of push together, the higher chance we have of being selected. And so mainly why that's being done is because what we're really concerned about is the security process. Is it a fair system for the selection? What we try to avoid is that out of, let's say, 100 participants, the same 3 are being chosen over and over again to produce a new block. So part of consensus mechanisms, where each blockchain has a different consensus mechanism, is thinking about this level of governance. So how do we ensure distribution? How do we ensure equal access? And how do we ensure that there is a fair selection process that's open for everyone? You have other considerations such as electricity consumption. So Bitcoin as proof of work is very much focused on large mining farms, which consumes a very large amount of electricity. And in proof of stake, since you're not competing to solve a mathematical problem, you don't have this excess of like GPU farms that exist. So that kind of goes into the evolution of different blockchains and thinking about how do we ensure that this process becomes sustainable long term.
You also said that every user or holder of cryptocurrency or tokens has access to the full registry of transactions historical.
Yes.
These registries are kept in some special places or even on its device, and the whole registry is kept.
So if you are running a node, you get access then to the full copy of the transaction history. And that transaction history becomes available on your IT infrastructure setup. So, that because everyone's kind of running a node, there exists an already database that's kind of maintained over time that people get access to.
And how big is usually, for example, data for Bitcoin? How many gigabytes need to keep on the node?
I need to check my records because I mainly do not focus on the data storage cost. However, the main concept here is that what we actually want to store on a blockchain is not the plain text data, but it is the cryptographic representation. So what we actually store on a blockchain will be kind of the digital fingerprints of data hashes and digital signatures. And then there's off-chain storage that's where the actual transaction data, for data records or assets, that's stored somewhere else. And so that's a very good question because we need to think about what information we're actually putting onto a blockchain if blockchains are going to exist for years and years to come. So now is the time for a coffee break, and I think maybe 11:10 we might pick back up. And so feel free to stretch your legs. And if you have any general questions, feel free to come up to ask. Thank you.